Titanic. We're going to attend to the fact that it's sinking. We're going to keep our eye on the primary problem. So he's a little more awake by now. So Pinocchio says, we'll make a fire. Now that's cool, I think, because he's down in chaos where his father is trapped, and the first thing he does is to use fire. And of course that's exactly what people do, right? Because we're fire users. And so this, and shaman, for example, are masters of fire. But there's this really primordial element to the story right here, and it's an indication that the thing that can transform order into chaos into productive order is also the same spirit that mastered fire. And so Pinocchio lays that out, and he says, we're going to build a fire. And Geppetto says, and we'll fill them up with smoke. And Geppetto says, great, smoked fish. So he's still stuck on this whole fish thing. And so Pinocchio runs around gathering up all the spare wood on the boat, including the furniture, which he starts to break. And Geppetto says, well, what are we going to sit on, while we eat our smoked fish? And Pinocchio basically says, politely, enough with the damn fish thing. I'm going to fill the whale with smoke, and that's going to make him sneeze, and then we can get the hell out of here. And Geppetto says, that's going to make him mad. It's not a good idea. And well, I would say that that's the stance of the benevolent state against innovation. Even if the innovation is positive, and even if it's transformative and freeing, the old state, even if it's good, is going to stand in opposition to that. And so that's also something that's very useful to know, because otherwise you can get bitter about that. Anyways, Pinocchio makes this big fire. Geppetto's pretty worried about it, and he starts to fill the whale up with smoke. And so this is where the whale turns into a fire-breathing dragon, which is quite cool. It's like in Sleeping Beauty, Maleficent turns into a fire-spewing dragon as well. And if you watch The Little Mermaid, that, what's her name, that Ursula, she turns into a gigantic snake-like creature as well, although she doesn't exactly spew fire. But the transformation of the ultimate monster into something like a dragon is very, very common, because it's the ultimate symbol of the unknown for a variety of reasons that we'll discuss later. So anyways, yes, it's a symbol of chaos. Anyways, and this is quite a horrifying scene. When my son watched, he watched Pinocchio when he was about 4, and he watched this scene over and over and over and over. I don't know how many times he watched that movie, but it must have been 100 times. But he was really fascinated by this scene, and he was like locked onto it. It was frightening, but there was something in it that he was processing and cottoning onto. So anyways, you see the whale is starting to prepare to sneeze, and it's belching out huge quantities of smoke and fire. And Pinocchio and Geppetto and the cat and the goldfish bowl are all on the raft, trying desperately to get out of the whale, which inhales and pulls them back and then sneezes and pushes them forward. And at some point they actually break free. And there's a good gates of hell image there with the whale belching out smoke like mad and its jaws open. And so they're paddling madly away to get away from this whale. And the whale is very angry, just as Geppetto suggested. And there's interesting sound effects that go along with this. The whale actually turns into a... That's what happens when your phone is smarter than you are. The whale actually turns into something that's like a locomotive, and the sound effects become industrial. So it's this monstrous machine-like locomotive dragon that's bent on the destruction of Pinocchio. And you could say it's an amalgam of natural and social forces completely unleashed. Everything's unleashed against Pinocchio and his father. And so they're having a hell of a time. There's big waves, and they end up, the whale actually abandons them, but before it does that, it nails them with its tail and blows the raft into smithereens. And so then they're both in the water, and Geppetto and Pinocchio are drowning. And Geppetto actually goes down for the 3rd time, so to speak. And as he's going down, he says to Pinocchio, save yourself, save yourself. And so that's kind of Pinocchio's last temptation, because Geppetto's had it, and he could just get to shore on his own, but he would have abandoned his father. And so that's the thing, and that's one of the issues that this movie grapples with, is what exactly is your responsibility? And you could say, well, it's to save yourself. But the myth that underlies this says, no, it's not. That's not exactly right. It's to rescue your father from the chaotic depths and integrate with that, and to save both. and that's your duty to your culture. But more than that, it's also your duty to your soul. It isn't going to work if you just save yourself, because you're still going to be a jackass puppet, even though you're going to be back on shore. So anyways, Pinocchio grabs Geppetto and carries him to shore, and the whale shows back up and gives him one more good wallop. And then we see everybody on shore, and it's peaceful again. And Geppetto is on his back on the dry land, and the kitten washes up, and the goldfish bowl washes up, and the cricket washes up. He's been outside the whale all of this time. And we see the cricket calling for Pinocchio, and then we see him lying in a pool of water dead. So he's died. Rescuing his father, he died. Well, why? Well, he is a jackass puppet, and maybe he was supposed to die if he rescued his father, because that insufficiency that characterized him is something that's destroyed by the process of encountering the chaos, which was so difficult it reforms the personality. And the same occurs when he rescues his father and incorporates that. So it's like Bilbo in the first part of the, what is it called, the Lord of the Rings, the Hobbit. He's this sort of jackass puppet guy, a little overprotected shire dweller at the beginning, and he goes on this tremendous adventure, and he has to develop the negative parts of his character. He actually has to become a professional thief, and he has to develop his bravery, and so the old personality in some sense has to die to give life to the new one. And so and you see in Harry Potter series too, at the very end, Potter dies and then is resurrected, right? And that actually happens to a slightly lesser degree in the second movie, where the resurrection is aided by the phoenix tears after he gets eaten by that, or he gets chomped by that big snake, which is roughly speaking the same thing that's happening here. Sorry about that. Okay, so anyways, Pinocchio's dead. That's not good. So the next scene, we see them back at home, and he's lying dead on the bed, and Geppetto and everyone else are mourning his loss. And then then we see this magic transformation, and we hear the blue fairy's voice. And so it's like he's pushed himself to his limits, and a natural process kicks back in and revivifies him. But now he's no longer a jackass puppet. He's actually something that's real. And so then he wakes up and he notices that now, he's undergone this proper transformation. He notices his hands in particular. And then he tells Geppetto, who refuses to even notice. He says, no, Pinocchio, you're dead, lie down. So, Pinocchio convinces him that he's not dead. And then in celebration, they start the clocks again. And so time kicks back in at that point. And so then they have a big celebration. Music happens again, because this is a celebratory moment. And they dance, and the harmony is restored. The good old guy has his son, and so the house is properly set up, and the old state has its vision and its capacity for transformation, and the thing that transforms has the stability of the culture behind it, and so perfect. And then the cricket goes outside, and he's talking to the star and the blue fairy, and he says he's pretty happy about how this has gone. And so then she gives him this little medal, which is made out of gold, and it's a sun and it's a mandala all at the same time. And so it's made out of gold, and gold is a noble metal. It doesn't mate indiscriminately with other metals. It doesn't tarnish. And so it's a metal that represents the sun. And then he flashes his little badge at the star, establishing a relationship between his function as the proper conscience and his orientation towards the highest good. And that's it there. So he's got this little sun. He's wearing this little sun. So he's also transformed and developed as a consequence of this entire process. And now Pinocchio's conscience is properly oriented. It's oriented towards the highest value. And then the movie closes. And that's Pinocchio.